Please welcome Dr. Dinesh Raj Bhuju.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shrestha and Dr. Dungel. It was a very towering introduction of a dwarf person like me. Uttam, you talked the story of the past. If I stand on the present tense, you are my inspirator. You are my inspiration. Your generation is my inspiration. That's why I'm standing here today. Namaste, respected chair of the session, and all friends from Nepal and abroad. I have a few presentation slides, but let me begin without them. I want to be heard, clear and loud. I have this privilege to make a keynote address. In doing so, I find myself a little nervous and flattered. As such, I'm not a policy specialist, but a science practitioner. I enjoy talking science philosophy with my grad students and immersing myself and interpreting my tree-line ecology data from the Himalaya. Nevertheless, I have my interest in science policy, as you all have. And Nepal has seen 3 editions of science policy. The first one was graduated in 1989, the second in 2006, and the third, unveiled in 2019, is in your hand, this one. When the first science policy was formulated, I was its translator. Yes, the original draft of the policy was in English, and I translated into Nepali. It was a great privilege for me. I was a young chap at that time, like Uttam. The second edition, like the first one, was presented in a national conference, and I was moderating the session, the conference. And coming to this third edition, I was a lucky guy to coordinate the draft committee. What a game of the time. A policy is a process, not a mere document. It starts from formulation, enters into implementation phase, and is revised and reviewed to address the priorities of the change system, I mean the political system. Dr. Amir Bahadur Shrestha, the main architect of the first science policy draft, told me so. Dr. Shrestha was the first executive director of RECAST, Research Center for Applied Science and Technology. RECAST was created back in 1970s to become more than a teaching institute. It was also the secretariat of the National Council for Science and Technology, NCST. The original NCST, that is the council, is no more now, nor the original RECAST, which is now a wing of Tribhuvan University. Therefore, Dr. Shrestha was the first and the last executive director of RECAST, who was not the university faculty. I'm mentioning all this because in Nepal, we conceive ideas, formulate policy, and get disoriented while implementing them. In 1968, the government of Nepal, that time it was His Majesty's government of Nepal, sought the assistance of UNESCO to formulate a science policy. The UNESCO team submitted a report with a recommendation Well, there were many recommendations, but one of the recommendations was to form a national science board under the direct leadership of the Prime Minister. And its Secretary General, please note my word, was to be a scientist or an engineer, not necessarily from within the government mechanism. A body was created, which I mentioned, NCST, National Council for Science and Technology, but not under the Prime Minister as suggested or recommended, but under the Vice Chair of the National Planning Commission. NCST could not work well. It was dissolved before it could formulate a science policy which was bestowed upon NCST. The first science policy, therefore, was formulated by NAST. At that time, it was RONAST, Royal Nepal Academy of Science and Technology. I still remember the Vice Chancellor of the NAST himself presented it in a large gathering of the scientists and technologists in the first National Conference of Science and Technology in 1988. And then it was in 1990 we saw the reinstitution of the multi-party system in Nepal. As you all know, many did not notice the science policy. Some knew it, but took it as a legacy of the dying panchayat system. Therefore, better forget than implement. When the second time the science policy was brought, we already had the Ministry of Science and Technology. But it was late to bring the science policy. The government was engaged in insurgency and a huge political upheaval was in progress. After the CPA, that is Comprehensive Peace Agreement, the ministry formed a task force. I was called in the team. We did some homeworks, but decided to wait for the new constitution to come. After all, a science policy or any other policy goes in tandem with a nation's political system as you know it. So in 2015, there was the earthquake, and also we had the new constitution promulgated. And it was followed by general elections. With the constitution in place, the government formed a 3 tiers. It was at municipality level, provincial level, and somebody says central, but it is federal. So it was a high time for us to review the science policy and bring a new one to gear our science and technology towards achieving the people's aspiration of economic prosperity and social transformation. A draft committee was formed in 2018. Earlier, we had a nationwide consultation in all 7 provinces for priority determination and also to know the status of science and technology in the country. I did all facilitation of the consultation meetings, and the secretary, Dr. Sanjay Sharma, who is chairing this session now, was our supporter and a motivator. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. In total, we had 479 participants, please mind it. That was in the first round. Over 250 questionnaires and interviews collected. Then the policy draft committee was formed in October, just after that consultation in 2018. We published, after the formation of this committee, a public notice in a daily newspaper, maybe for 2 days, I think, and sent letters to all 753 local governments, that is the municipalities, and all 7 provincial governments through the cabinet, through the government of Nepal. And also we sent letters of request to dozens of departments. We also sent hundreds of emails, including Nepali diaspora. Some of you had got it, and also I got your feedback. Thank you all. We conducted 14 consultation meetings covering all 7 provinces. The participants included parliamentarians, academicians, professors, teachers, scientists, engineers, practitioners, and of course, young and experienced. And we had intensive team workshop. Sometimes we quarreled actually. Dr. Tringle might be recalling it. It was perhaps the first such massive process in the process of any policy in Nepal. I beg your pardon if I'm mistaken. So the policy was unveiled by the Prime Minister of Nepal, no other person. On what day? On the National Science Day, Ashwin Yek. Present at the occasion were former Prime Minister, Minister of Education, member of National Planning Commission, and NAST Vice Chancellor. What do you need more to witness? Earlier, we had a national conference in the presence of the Deputy Prime Minister, who is still the Deputy Prime Minister now. So we left no stone unturned. I'm sure my team will agree with me. So that was the birth of the present STI policy, this policy. I still feel the pang of its birth. On the Science Day this year, it has turned 1 year. First anniversary. The question is, has it been nurtured? Has it been cared for? Has it been enough nourished? And how many milestones we have installed? So the process of policy implementation is not an easy job. I know it, and you know it. In a quick check last night, I found a good number of 6,000 journal papers in Science Direct. Imagine, in last 20 or 25 years. There are hundreds of reports, textbooks, and references. All renowned universities, you take name, Harvard, Oxford, Tsinghua, Cambridge, Seoul, you take name. They all offer courses on science policy and science policy implementation. It simply means there is a huge interest in policy implementation because there are problems and of course there are solutions. Well, many examples could be there and are there. It's a matter of perception. You also have a lot of examples, I know. The only difference is that I'm having this privilege to speak now. Otherwise, you can give hundreds of examples on how science policy is successfully implemented or how science policy is not implemented, both. Here I have an example from Brazil, the Latin American country, and emerging economy. Brazil prepared a national policy of health, a part of science policy back in 2003. The policy formulation involved, please note my words, the numbers. The policy formulation by Brazil, policy formulation of the health science, involved 510 researchers, policymakers, and 15,000 participants from 307 cities and 24 states. A national conference was organized, which approved the policy in 2004. So it took at least 2 years. And one of the priority agendas was the government, that is the Brazilian government's investment in research and development. In 1 year, 24 calls for proposals were launched. That is at least twice a month. And 1,300 research proposals were financed. The Department of Science and Technology alone, because there are many other departments, but this department alone invested $25 million on health research and development only. So there's a story of Brazil and emerging economy. Now let me share some of my slides. Just a moment, please bear with me. Okay, I think I should also. So here you have, just a moment, this is making me problem. So I stop my video so that it will be easy for me to describe it. Please hold me. So I was talking about Brazil. It was just to give an example, because there are 215 countries in the world, but this is just one example. Then what institutional modality would be the best for policy implementation? This could be a good question for you, but unfortunately, I warn you, there is no single model that fits all which you can copy and just apply. In the past, after 1950s, there was a model called elastic model. Here you can see in the figure 1. It was a successful model during the Cold War. And a success example is the Dane Soviet Union space supremacy. They sent human beings before the US. The second is, here you can see in the figure 2, the laissez-faire model, where there are separate institutional spheres with strong borders dividing them. But both of these are outdated now. Here I have a Nigerian model presented by the Nigerian science minister, who is also a professor of mathematics, I guess, very recently. The three entities, government, industry, and the university, which you can see here, are visibly seen here with equal ranking. This is based on the Swedish model developed by Ekowicz and Lederstroff some 20 years ago. Here they have 4 types of organizations, as you can see in this picture. One is, of course, government or the state. The other is academia, and then the industry. And then there is a trilateral networks and hybrid organizations. Quite interesting, isn't it? The objective of this model is to realize an innovative environment consisting of university spin-off firms, trilateral initiatives for knowledge-based economic development, and strategic alliances among firms, that is private firms, government laboratories, and academic research groups. So this is what they call triple helix. As you know, triple helix is a biological metaphor, like DNA, RNA, something like that, you know it. Therefore, being a biological metaphor, a triple helix is not expected to be stable. The arrangements are often encouraged, but not controlled by the government. Please note the word. Whether through new rules of the game, the government do not direct or indirect influence through direct or indirect financial assistance, or through any act or foundations, or in our case, the council like UGC. Because these foundations and UGCs are just the postmaster, not to influence actually, to facilitate. A triple helix configuration looks clumsy, I know. You can see the picture here. Very clumsy, looks very, very complicated. In fact, they are not synchronized a priori. They generate puzzles for the participants like you and me, analysts like you and me, and policymakers to solve. So that was a theoretical perspective of policy implementation for technology development, innovation, whatever you can say. We may discuss it for long in a different and separate session. Let me now put my view on the implementation modality of Nepal's national science, technology, and innovation policy. A policy is often more of a hypothesis. Implementation converts a policy into an action program. In the present STI policy, there are 5 objectives, 29 strategies, and 50 executing policies, which are in fact the projects. It appears a big figure, I know. If I were there in the shoes of the implementing agency, this is what, or this is how I would do. Here you can see. For the implementation purpose, I would group them into 11 parts. As you can see here, infrastructure and legal framework, human resources and capacity building, finance and funding, fundamental cutting-edge science, research and development, product and markets, innovation and incubation, education, training and curriculum, 9, awareness and public understanding, 10, cooperation and collaboration, and finally, documentation, monitoring, and plan. So among these 11, what I would do is I will separate their works. I will divide the responsibilities, like for the academia and research organization 2, 4, and 9. For the government, that is federal, province, and municipality 1 and 11. For industries and enterprises 5 and 6. And what about the others? The others they will share. For example, 7 will be shared by academia and industries. The 8 will be shared by academia and government. And the 3 will be shared by government and industries. And the 10 will be shared by all these 3. So this, what I would say, as a simplistic model that I think, because I like simplicity in science. As I mentioned earlier, we had a series of consultation meetings, interviews, interactions, almost on every occasion. The first thing we encountered was a question, will this policy be implemented? I was not sure, still I'm not sure, if those question makers had gone through the seminal work by Aaron Wildavsky, Why Planning Fails in Nepal. I'm not sure whether they have gone through it. Published in 1972, Why Planning Fails in Nepal. Published in 1972, the paper has Planning in Nepal. The paper has stated, let me read out. Planning in Nepal has little to do with anything that happens in that country. Planned targets are not met. Planned expenditures are not met. The paper has explored the reasons for the failure. 1, insufficient information. 2, few and poor project proposals. 3, inability to program foreign aid. 4, opposition of the finance ministry. 5, severely limited capacity to administer development. And the author has also specially mentioned the tortuous release of funds. Tortuous relief of funds. I let you make a judgment if the situation is still prevailing. Wildavsky visited Nepal back in 1971. He was associated with Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley. I know some of the presenters here are from that university. He interviewed 29 personnel, including the Secretary of Finance.
Dr. Bhuju, we have 5 minutes.
I'm enough. I will do it within 3 minutes. Members of Planning Commission. So in the next write-up, published in 1973, Wildavsky has the title, If Planning is Everything, Maybe It's Nothing. So we have this national STA policy. Time will tell you if it is everything or nothing. The world is passing through the perils of COVID-19 pandemic, and Nepal is never an exception. Not only the health sector, but all through development pillars, society, economy, and environment have been shaken. Before these pillars are uprooted, please move ahead, not fighting against Corona, but along with Corona. Science knows Corona better than anybody else, better than anything else. A belief in science is the only solution to today's paranoia and looming impacts on poverty levels. The rest of my opinion is in the abstract. Nepal's science policy implementation nowhere at a crossroad. You might have read it already, so I skip it. I value your time. Let me just repeat at this juncture of pain and privilege that science, we need science, and still more science. Thank you. Thank you all for your attention.